The book begins with a seemingly insignificant story, a young woman who starts running 1 block a day to deal with post-breakup anxiety. It's mundane, unremarkable, and at first, uninspiring. But McEwen uses this small example to launch his thesis, that consistent, low-friction motion builds more progress over time than intense but unsustainable effort. The woman doesn't just get healthier, she eventually writes a memoir, becomes a coach, and changes her entire life trajectory. Her success wasn't born from a heroic act but from understanding how to start small and keep going. Greg McEwen frames momentum as something accessible to everyone, not the result of talent or luck, but of structure and rhythm. He begins to dismantle the myth that success is linear or driven purely by willpower. Instead, he introduces the metaphor of a flywheel. Once set in motion, it sustains itself with less and less effort. Momentum, he says, is not just acceleration, it's compounding intention. It's not about doing more, it's about moving deliberately and letting that movement create its own inertia. Early chapters explore how modern life disrupts momentum. McEwen recounts stories of CEOs, teachers, athletes, and parents whose lives are fragmented by constant interruptions, misplaced priorities, and burnout. He identifies what he calls friction factors, internal and external barriers that stall our progress before it can build force. This section includes research from behavioral psychology and cognitive science, showing how even minor disruptions can reset our motivational systems. He then walks us through the concept of frictionless first steps. These are micro-actions that are so small, so easy, that they bypass resistance entirely. One story tells of a burned-out software engineer who couldn't bring himself to write a single line of code after a tough layoff. Instead of pushing harder, he committed to opening his laptop each morning and doing nothing else. After a week, his resistance softened. By the second week, he was coding again. The lesson was clear: movement, no matter how modest, creates psychological alignment. McEwen introduces the term, progress scaffolding, the idea that once small actions are established, they can be built upon, layer by layer. He references historical figures like Darwin, who worked in deeply consistent ways, producing massive intellectual shifts not through bursts of genius, but through incremental progress. He contrasts this with modern hustle culture, which often glamorizes overwork at the expense of direction. In one of the book's most memorable case studies, McEwen recounts his work with a nonprofit director facing mission drift. Overwhelmed by fundraising, outreach, and internal politics, she'd lost touch with the organization's original purpose. McEwen helped her rebuild momentum not by adding new goals, but by pruning obligations, saying no, and setting up simple routines to review progress. Within 3 months, donor engagement improved, burnout decreased, and most importantly, her clarity returned. Midway through the book, the author introduces the momentum map, a simple framework to align values, energy, and goals. The first part of the map is defining the essential intent, a sharp, specific, emotionally charged vision of what you want to achieve. The second is sequencing, arranging tasks in the order they're most likely to succeed, based not on urgency, but on energy flow. Finally, the third is automation, building rituals and routines that lock in the rhythm of progress. Greg argues that we often overvalue intensity and undervalue consistency. In a chapter titled "The Power of Predictable Wins," he shows how routines not only build reliability, but also reduce decision fatigue. One school principal he coached reduced her daily decision-making by 80% through morning planning rituals and staff delegation systems. This freed her mental energy to focus on vision and community building, things that mattered more than her previous 12-hour hustle days. The emotional layer of momentum is not ignored. McEwen spends time on what he calls emotional velocity, the idea that positive emotions accelerate our forward motion, while negative ones slow us down. He teaches techniques for cultivating joy, awe, and gratitude through simple practices. One client started a momentum journal, where she recorded 3 small things she did each day that moved her forward. Within weeks, her self-image changed from stuck to in motion. A key tension the book explores is how to balance momentum with rest. Unlike many productivity books that focus only on output, McEwen devotes an entire chapter to restorative stillness. He warns that without deliberate rest, momentum turns into runaway force, fast but directionless, exhausting but unproductive. His approach is deeply grounded in research on ultradian rhythms and neuroplasticity. Intentional pauses, he explains, are not breaks from momentum, they are part of the system. One of the most intimate chapters involves Greg's own story. He shares how, after the success of essentialism, he found himself caught in a whirlwind of opportunities, demands, and expectations. Ironically, he'd lost his own momentum. He recounts how he used the very strategies in the book, redefining intent, restoring boundaries, and designing tiny rituals, to reclaim not just his productivity, but his sense of peace. It's a moment of honesty that elevates the book beyond theory. The closing chapters focus on scaling momentum. How do you take personal momentum and apply it to teams, families, or communities? McEwen shares insights from organizational leaders who've redesigned company culture by aligning team rituals with shared values. One marketing agency built flow blocks into their schedules, 90-minute focus sessions followed by 20-minute debriefs. Over time, this produced not just better work, but a better workplace. Ultimately, Momentum is not a book about speed. It's a book about alignment. McEwen makes the case that achievement is not about doing the most, but about doing what matters most in a way that is light, repeatable, and emotionally energizing. The question isn't, how can I go faster? It's, what can I do today that will make tomorrow easier to begin? The final message is one of hope. No matter how stuck, overwhelmed, or lost someone feels, they are one small step from motion. And from motion comes momentum. With careful design, clear intention, and emotional resonance, anyone can begin again, not in a frenzy, but in a rhythm. Momentum is not a miracle. It is a method. And McEwen teaches that method with grace, insight, and a quiet but persuasive urgency.